All right, today we're going to break down something that's incredibly important but often feels a little complicated. India's Prevention of Sexual Harassment policy, the POSH policy. This is way more than just a dusty legal document. It's a framework that's actually designed to protect your rights at work. So let's dive into what that really means for you. So let me ask you a question and be honest with yourself. If you were ever in a situation at work, would you know exactly what to do? Would you know your rights, the steps you could take, the protections you're guaranteed? The thing is, most people don't. And that's okay. That's exactly why we're doing this. So we're going to walk through this whole policy step by step. The goal here is simple, to give you a really clear, straightforward guide to the system that exists to make sure every single workplace is safe and respectful. And just so we're all on the same page, everything we're about to talk about comes directly from the source, India's official Prevention of Sexual Harassment at the Workplace Act. We're sticking right to the facts to give you what you need to know. Okay, so first things first, what even is harassment according to the law? To really get a handle on this policy, we have to start with the official definition. And you'll see it's both really specific and also surprisingly broad. The single most important word in this entire definition is right there, unwelcome. The law is crystal clear that sexual harassment is any act or behavior that is unwelcome. And this is crucial. It doesn't matter if that act is direct and obvious or if it's more subtle and just implied. Now, the policy doesn't just leave that hanging. It gives really concrete examples. We're talking about things like unwelcome physical contact, any kind of demand for sexual favors, making sexually colored remarks, showing pornography, or really any other unwelcome conduct, whether it's physical, something that's said, or even nonverbal. And it's so important to understand that harassment isn't always about a single, isolated act. It's also about the environment and the context. So this can include things like implied threats about your job security, someone interfering with your work to create a hostile or intimidating atmosphere, or any kind of humiliating treatment that starts to affect your health or your safety. So we've got a handle on what harassment is. The next logical questions are, who does this policy protect? And where does it actually apply? And you might be surprised to find out the scope is much wider than most people think. So here's the key takeaway. This protection is universal inside an organization. It doesn't matter one bit if you're a permanent employee, a temp on a contract, a daily wage worker. Heck, you could be an intern or even just a visitor on the premises. If you're in that work environment, you are covered by this policy. Period. And what about the workplace itself? Well, the policy defines it super broadly. It's not just your desk or the office building. It includes any place you visit for work, like going to a client's office. It covers company-provided transport, like a cab or a bus. And yep, it even extends to office parties, offsites, and any other social event that's connected to your work. Okay, knowing the definitions is one thing, but what do you actually do if something happens? Let's walk through the first and honestly most critical steps for filing a complaint. The very first thing you absolutely need to burn into your memory is the timeline. A complaint has to be filed within 3 months of the incident. This is a really critical window of time, so just being aware of it is half the battle. Now, the process is designed to be as accessible as possible. You submit a written complaint to your company's Internal Complaints Committee, or ICC. You should include any evidence you might have and the names of any witnesses. And there's even a built-in support system. If for any reason you can't write the complaint yourself, the ICC is legally required to help you. So, you filed the complaint. What happens next? The policy lays out a very clear roadmap for how an investigation actually works and what the different paths to resolution look like. Once that complaint is officially in the hands of the ICC, it can basically go down one of two roads to find a resolution. And understanding the difference between these two paths is really, really important. Okay, so the first path is called conciliation. Think of this as a more informal settlement process. But, and this is a big but, it can only happen if the person who made the complaint requests it, and it can't involve any sort of monetary payout. The second and much more common path is a formal inquiry. This is exactly what it sounds like, a structured investigation where the ICC gathers evidence, hears from everyone involved, and then writes a formal report with its findings. Now, to make sure these cases don't just drag on forever, the formal inquiry has to follow a really strict timeline. The person the complaint is against, the respondent, gets notified within 7 days and then has 10 days to reply. From that point, the entire inquiry has to be finished within 90 days. Then the ICC gives its report to the employer, who has 60 days to act on whatever the recommendations are. This whole defined process is a really key protection.
Going through a process like this can be incredibly stressful and difficult. And that's exactly why the policy has rights and safeguards built right into it to protect the person making the complaint while the investigation is going on.
So while the inquiry is happening, you are not just left to fend for yourself. You could actually request something called interim relief. This could be something like asking for yourself or the respondent to be transferred to another department. It could mean being granted leave for up to 3 months. It could even mean requesting that your performance review be put on hold, so there's zero chance of any kind of retaliation through your work assessment. Now this might be one of the most important safeguards of all. The policy demands strict confidentiality. This quote from the Act itself makes it totally unambiguous. The identities of the complainant, the respondent, and any witnesses cannot be released to the public or the media, period. And breaking that rule is a punishable offense. And to make sure the process is fair for everyone involved, the policy does have penalties for anyone who files a complaint that they know is false or malicious. But, and this is a really critical distinction, the law makes it clear that just being able to prove your case is not the same thing as making a malicious complaint. This protects people from being punished just for coming forward in good faith. Lastly, let's not forget that the responsibility for all of this doesn't just fall on individuals. The employer has a list of duties they are mandated to perform. They have to provide a safe working environment, they have to set up a proper ICC, they have to clearly display the consequences of harassment, and, this is a big one, they have to organize regular workshops to make sure everyone knows this policy even exists. So what's the big takeaway from all of this? Understanding these definitions, these procedures, and these protections isn't just some academic exercise. Knowing your rights is the absolute first step towards creating and demanding a workplace culture that's safe, respectful, and fair for every single person who walks through the door. So that leaves us with one final question to think about. Now that you've seen the framework, what is one concrete step your own workplace could take to do a better job of communicating this policy to every single employee? Just think about it, because awareness, that's where real change starts.